Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Speaker. This article deals with adjustments we can make to take taxes off of the backs of our constituents. So I am proposing an amendment which is LC 004597/9.
Representative Morgan moves Amendment LC 004597/9. That is seconded by Representative Costa, Representative Giarrusso, Leader Newberry, Representative Roberts, Representative Chippendale, Representative Price, Representative Lancia, Representative Filippi, Representative McMeth, and Representative Riley. Proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm presenting this on behalf of the entire Republican caucus, and it is a phase out of the car tax. As you all remember, in 2008, when our country faced a significant recession, we allowed municipalities to add the car tax back to their tax rolls. We seek over the next 7 years to phase it out in its entirety, and this is the first installment. We will be using $37 million of funding, that is subsidies, legislative grants, and some brand new staffing positions in government to fund the $37 million. This year, we will raise the car tax exemption from $500 to $1,500, which will give welcome relief to our constituents, to everyone who owns a car. 2 years ago, we raised all of the DMV fees for license renewal, registration renewal, and inspections 300%. It fell very hard on many of the people in Rhode Island. This will help them with that extra expense, but it will also help them keep more money in their wallet. And when people have money, they spend it here in Rhode Island, in our stores and our restaurants, to take their family to the movies or to get a round of golf. They use it here in Rhode Island, and it stays in Rhode Island. And it has the impact of increasing our economic activity. So this is a win on all cases for Rhode Island and Rhode Island families. And I urge you to vote for it.
Representative Blazewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. I rise in opposition to this amendment. I think it's important to provide a little bit of context. First of all, the car tax is a municipal tax. It is not a state tax. And the state merely provides a level of reimbursement over time to blunt the impact on taxpayers. So cities and towns are the ones that set this tax. It's a city and town tax, not a state tax. But secondly, this amendment is not sound fiscal policy for several reasons. First of all, it creates a structural imbalance in the deficit in the budget, not only this year, but in future years. At the end of the schedule set out in this amendment, it would cost in excess of $130 million to fund the proposal here, and there's no plan for doing it whatsoever. So it creates a structural deficit. And secondly, it creates a deficit in this year. The amount that's being scooped from various sources just doesn't cover the amount of the car tax relief in the amendment. And that third, and this we don't even need to get into this unless we'd like to, but it scoops from a lot of programs that are good for the state. I mean, we're trying to increase our tax base through economic development tools that we passed last year, and this amendment scoops those tools as well as impacts our hospitals, the clean diesel program, and other programs. For that reason, I urge the House to defeat this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I will not be as effusive in my praise as Democratic Party Chairman McNamara was a few minutes ago, I will say this about, and my comments relate specifically to this amendment, but also to this budget as a whole. Speaker Mattiello, since he took over in 2014, this is the third budget process we've gone through, and contrary to the budgets I had to deal with as a representative prior to that, where I found myself sitting there thinking, what on earth are we doing? I will give credit where it's due, and for the most part, for the last few years, including last year when I supported the budget, there weren't many things in the budget that I said, that's a terrible idea. But these are missed opportunities. As Whip Blazewski was just discussing, budgets are a matter of priorities. When you show someone your budget, in any context, it shows you where your priorities lie. My biggest criticism with this budget, and this amendment is an attempt to fix that, is that the budget does not really do that much for the middle class. Yes, we talk about beach fee reductions, but judging a $9 billion budget on beach fee reductions is akin to judging a steakhouse meal by the quality of the after-dinner mints, okay? So we have here something in this budget that is a good idea. We have another amendment coming up, which I'm not going to repeat myself on. If you'll give me some leeway, I'm not going to get up twice, to try to improve the tax credit or the elimination of state income tax on pension and retirement income, which is an idea we proffered. It's in here as a starter. We don't think it goes far enough. Do you want to help the middle class of Rhode Island or not? Because what this budget does is it does in every budget that I've seen here, and before I got elected, it does a lot for the poor in this state, which we should do. We have an obligation to do that, and this budget, like all of our budgets, does a lot of that. And it does a lot for well-connected people who can hire high-priced lobbyists to come in and lobby for various things. The Commerce Corporation is asking and getting a lot of money in this budget to do all kinds of, whatever term you want to use, corporate welfare is a pejorative, but it's true. Now, everyone's going to point to GE and say, well, GE was a big success. It looks like GE might be a big success. But then we had $5 million spent on a tourism campaign that went nowhere. Representative Shikarchi and I were on Lively Experiment just last week. We had this debate. You can't unilaterally disarm when it comes to incentives. I get that. I'm not trying to be an ideologue here. But the idea of funneling all of this money to an administration that, except for just this past week with GE, has not proven successful at all in attracting things to the state, I find highly questionable. And that kind of financial help only goes, frankly, to the rich and the well-connected. So what we have is a budget that helps the poor and it helps the rich and the well-connected, but does not help the middle class. I was here, I voted against it, but I was here when the car tax, which is in fact not technically a state tax, but let's call it what it is. It was the state that phased it out through the program back in 1999 or 2000. I was here when we had to re-implement the car tax. The car tax is terrible. One of the few things I ever agree with our former Governor Chafee on is the burden that property taxes place on the taxpayers and hard workers in this state. Property taxes, of which car taxes are the worst, are something we should be trying to phase out, and this is a good proposal to try to do it. We need more middle-class relief in this state, because you know who does not have lobbyists that come into this building? The poor, they may not realize it, but they've got plenty of lobbyists. They've got government activists, they have nonprofit lobbyists that come in and lobby for them all the time. The rich, they've got lobbyists too. But the middle class in this state has been getting squeezed for years and years. And this amendment is a good proposal that everyone here should get behind, as is our second amendment, which we'll put in a little while, which I'm not going to get up and speak on, at least not initially, unless someone says something. But that is the problem with this budget. It helps the poor, it helps the rich. It does not really help the vast majority of our constituents. It doesn't hurt them, and I give credit where it's due, but it doesn't help them enough. And that's why I will not be able to support this budget, and why I think we should all support this amendment.
Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I think this is a really, really good amendment. And I'll tell you why.
Is it really, really, really good?
It's really, really, really good. But it doesn't do anything for the town that I live in, because the town that I live in already has a threshold that blows this thing right out of the water. I'm just very fortunate that East Greenwich still has a $6,000 exemption. So if I was representing Providence or Pawtucket or Central Falls, I'd be really, really concerned about whether I should vote for this amendment, because it hurts the average person. You know, there are cars that are blowing blue smoke down the road, and people are paying high property tax on it. They probably couldn't sell that car for $300, but somebody at DMV has it valued at maybe $1,200. So because their town only has a $500 exemption, they're paying a property tax on it. Now, in my town, that car is tax-free. If you have a boat trailer, it's tax-free. If you have any kind of a trailer that's not $6,000, it's tax-free. So my town really gets it. And I just wish that we would do the same thing to help everybody else out. And then with regard to scoops and other programs that we're hurting, What about helping the people? Let's just help the people. You know, the other private entities, they can figure it out. But the people need a voice, and that's what we're here for. And I think they need a break. Thank you.
Representative McLaughlin.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, in reference to the amendment, you know, it's a well-meant amendment, but when they phased out, the auto tax, when they did that, they created a city and town responsibility. Okay, what I'd like to propose is, and I've been working on it for 6 months. Okay, I've been actually lobbying my town council members, all right, to increase the abatement. Cumberland is currently at $500, all right? If we do this incrementally in every city and town, okay, number one, when they increase, they lose revenue. We all know that, and that's a given. But if we increase the abatement incrementally over a 5-10 year period, I would urge each and every one of you to get a hold of your town council members and just take them out for coffee, okay? Have them see if they can put it on the agenda. We actually had it on the agenda in Cumberland, and it didn't pass this year, but we're going to shoot for it. We're at 500 now. You know, we want to give an abatement up to 1,500. So try that, and this is what I would recommend. It is now a city and town issue. Thank you.
Representative Filippi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Corporate welfare and a centrally planned economy versus middle class tax relief. Choose wisely.
Succinct. Representative Blazejewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. We haven't gotten to Article 17 yet, so I wasn't going to get up and talk about the actual programs that are being defunded in this proposal, but I suppose now is a good time. I'd keep in mind that last year we passed a budget that included those economic development tools, and it was passed unanimously on this floor. One of those tools is Rebuild RI, and it is a program that provides a tax credit up to 20 or 30% of a project's cost to try to spur economic development. And we've seen progress. Already General Electric has been mentioned several times on this floor. It is a top 12, Fortune 12 company. It varies between 6 and 11 over the years. But it is a major coup for Rhode Island to get 100 high-paying jobs in downtown Providence. The Rebuild RI Fund is a program. It is not a fund that can be scooped from. It is a program. And it's a tax credit program. And by taking money out of the fund, all you've done is create a structural deficit down the road. So this is not like there's money set aside and we can just take it and not have consequences. There are consequences to the change in this amendment. And although it's not Article 17 yet, I urge this House to continue on the path of trying to use the economic development tools to build on the commitment of Wexford, to build on the commitment of General Electric, and not take the money away to create structural deficits down the road, given the fact that this is a program, Rebuild RI, and not a fund. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Chippendale.
Thank you, Speaker. I think the 100 proposed jobs from GE is fantastic. Anytime we get an opportunity to get some high-tech jobs, that is outstanding. However, we're paying them to come here, or incentivizing them to come here, so to speak. If we made Rhode Island more attractive by making her residents more able to live more comfortably within Rhode Island, it would become more attractive to businesses. We wouldn't have to we wouldn't have to incentivize them to come here by paying them millions of dollars. Rather, our environment would be so inviting because we have a vibrant middle class. The people who are consumers, the people who are the workers, the people who are the middle managers. But yet we're not. Corporate welfare, again. We should not have to pay companies to come here. We should make this a better state so that they want to come here. And this amendment does exactly that. And it's a very simple yes or no question. Thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I too wasn't going to get up and talk about the economic development piece of this, but I think Representative Blazejewski has a good point, certainly germane to the amendment, so I will mention it. First and foremost, let me just say that I don't want anyone to be under the illusion that if you don't pass this amendment, the structural budget deficit's eliminated, because that's not going to happen. We have one no matter what. This amendment is simply a reflection of our priorities and what we told our constituents years ago we were going to do. This is saying we're going to take the single most unpopular, the single most regressive tax in the state and give the money back to the cities and towns so we're not leaving them with a deficit. But if you're wondering where the money comes from, we are attacking these programs that are growing and growing and growing at the monstrosity known as Commerce RI. Over the last 2 years, we've spent over $160 million in total spending there. And I know we're all very happy about General Electric and landing those jobs. And I certainly expect that to be the beginning of even more great news and not the end. But whether or not we leave all of these programs intact has nothing to do with whether or not our economy is going to change. For one thing, these economic development programs are not going to reverse years and years of decline. It's just not possible. But it's also ignoring the fact that without broad-based tax reform and providing an educated workforce that has the skills that companies like GE want, we will never have economic development at the scale of places like Boston. So take a look at where the money comes from and realize that this is a very solid value proposition for your constituents, for your cities and towns. This gives them tax relief where they want it. This helps the least fortunate among us who are trying to get to work in a car and trying to pay a tax, just like the wealthiest are trying to pay this tax. Let's get rid of it for all of them. And let's take the money from very unpopular programs, and let's not be distracted by the fact that a very small percentage of one of the programs within this very wide encompassing agency happened to become successful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard a buzzword about how the economic development and all that stuff, but it makes me wonder, how is it really working out? You know, I think I have a pretty decent business IQ. Like, what's the return on the investment? How much is it costing us per job? And what are they doing for the businesses that have been here forever? My business is in Johnston. I drive up and down Plainfield Pike a number of times. Has anyone noticed a for sale sign on that building that says Honeywell? That 500 jobs left Rhode Island. What has the Commerce Department done about that? So we're so busy chasing the pennies that we're losing the dollars. Thank you.
Representative Morgan.
Rhode Island has the 6th highest property tax rate in the country. And in fact, Providence has the distinction of having the 3rd highest property tax rate in the United States. 3rd highest. That's the problem. Why don't companies want to come here unless we pay them to come? It's because we haven't done the hard work of actually repairing our economic climate. We want to put ornaments like the air service subsidy. We're going to pay airlines for empty seats so we can have nonstop flights to particular cities that we like. We're going to pay college graduates to stay here, even if there aren't any jobs for them. You know, they'll stay if there's good jobs. The fact of the matter is, our constituents, the residents, the people of Rhode Island, have a heavy burden in the property tax rate. I talk to people from other states, and the same house would pay a fraction of what we're paying here. It is a quality of life difference in our property tax rate and those of other states like North Carolina and Florida and Texas. We need to do what we can to help constituents, and the car tax is an initiative that we took years ago to eliminate it. We're just bringing it back because it should never have gone away. We should phase it out. We can phase it out. As my colleague, Representative Riley said, Commerce Corporation has gotten $160 million in the last 2 years, and they intend to keep that gravy train going because it's bigger this year than it was last year. Taking some of this money, which is used poorly, which makes us, the taxpayers, private equity investors, venture capitalists, it's a good thing that we're taking it away from them because we shouldn't be there to begin with. The film tax credit has never been successful for Rhode Islanders. The jobs it makes are temporary and low paying. And the legislative grants should go away. I think the constituents would rather have that money in their pockets. This sets the state on the path that we never should have abandoned, and that is to eliminate the car tax. This is the first down payment. I urge you to vote for it because you will be voting for the average families in your district who could use a bit of a break. Thank you.
Representative Ruggiero. Chairwoman Ruggiero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I do agree with Whip Blazejewski. This is a local municipal tax, but my colleagues have been talking a lot about the state incentivizing GE to be here, and that's what states do to lure companies. And I have to say, one of the reasons, if you don't know, why GE left Connecticut is because for the past 6 years, Connecticut has been raising their taxes because of their unfunded pension. We took a hard vote several years ago and have pension reform. GE realizes what we've done in this state, the corporate tax going from 9% to 7%. And the real reason why GE is here, talk to the governor, talk to people who know in economic development, talent in Rhode Island. They're impressed with the computer science program at Brown, the graphic art department at RISD, and the fact that we have engineering at URI. So with all honesty, I think as a body, we've done some tremendous work for economic development to create jobs and to keep taxes down in this state. And for that reason, I would urge you to vote this amendment down and let's move on with the budget. Thank you, Speaker.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'll keep my remarks brief. I'm trying not to get up twice in any one amendment or article. But some of the comments that I'm hearing are just inviting some scrutiny. Again, quick recap, this does nothing to change the structural deficit. We have one either way, so it's a values question. Our values, in my opinion, at least, should lie in cutting a very unpopular aggressive tax. At the end of the day, I don't have a difficult time facing my constituents, nor should any of you, saying we cut your car tax at the expense of the people who came up with the brilliant idea of cooler and warmer. But I want everyone to remember, since we're talking about GE and the success of this program, that since we created EDC many years ago and we've gone through many iterations of economic development programs, how have we transformed our economy? Why does everyone seem convinced that all of a sudden we have it right and we're hitting our stride, and but for these programs we wouldn't have any growth? I mean, it really invites the question, why are you putting tax relief in the rest of this article if only Commerce RI is responsible for economic growth? So I would suggest to you, if you're going to cut the corporate income tax, something us Republicans have been saying to do for years, and the fact that such a small portion and one of a very narrow program within the Commerce RI portfolio is responsible for GE, why spend the money on the rest? It's a waste. It's not going to affect the economy. We should have growth. We should have structural growth in our revenue. All of these programs notwithstanding, we should be able to pay for this. And if we can't, why are we doing any of these other things? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Leader DeSimone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Well, just for the membership to know, I mean, it's nice to be able to put an amendment in and talk about all the wonderful things you're going to do with that amendment. But, you know, we have to be practical, and we're not going to help the middle class when we create structural deficits or we get our state budget and we put a huge hole in it with unfunded liabilities. So just to give you an example of this particular amendment, the amendment derives about $47.8 million in its first year for the $1,500 exemption. The actual cost is $65 million. So right off the bat, we're $20 million in the hole. Now, it goes on for $2,500, $8,000 in the third year. Just to give you an example, in 2010, the exemption was $6,000. The cost was $130 million. So my colleagues on the other side can, get up and say, well, we want to do this for the middle class and for our constituents, but they don't fund it properly. This would be a huge burden on our state budget. Over $200 million and beyond to get rid of this car tax. And who's going to replace the money for the municipalities? The state is. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to attract businesses to come to our state and we're going to keep the quality of life in our state, we have to make serious proposals. It's not enough to get up and say, I want to wipe out the car tax and not fund it. Imagine not funding this proposal in the first year, short $20 million. Ladies and gentlemen, while I think the intent is very good and it sounds great, and I know you're well-intentioned, but this is a serious budget. We have serious concerns that we're addressing in this budget, and we can't start down the road of building holes that could exceed $200 million over the next 3 or 4 years. So, members, I would urge you to vote against this amendment.
Leader Newberry.
Yeah, just very briefly, I do take some exception. This is a serious proposal. The leader is correct that if this passes this year, the funding is in there for this year. But if you want to continue the trend of reducing the car tax burden, you have to come up with the money next year and into the future. That's exactly what this body did almost 20 years ago. You were here. That's what this body did, and it was working. It was working until 2009 when, for terrible reasons and a terrible economy, this body, with the concurrence of Governor Kucheri, reversed course. But it's a matter of priorities. The scare tactic about, structural deficits, it's a budget. Your budget shows your priorities. We have the money for this year to raise it to $1,500. We can come back next year, we can raise it again, and we can find the money if we are willing to not fund other things. It's a matter of priorities, that's all it is. It's a serious proposal, you can disagree with it, but it is a very serious proposal because it's been done before.
Leader Newberry, just to correct you, I believe the reversal of the phase-out of the car tax was Governor Kucheri's proposal, not concurrence, proposal. Leader Newberry.
You are correct, and I was highly critical of him at the time. But the point is, as we all know, the budget passes with a veto-proof majority every time since it requires 2/3 in the Constitution. So every budget that passes cannot be vetoed by the governor without being easily overridden. So as we know, Mr. Speaker, you take great pride that the budget is controlled by the House, with which I agree. And I think that's good.
The governor is not going to veto his own proposal. Thank you, Leader Newberry. Representative Macbeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been here this is my 8th budget. And in the beginning, as a freshman, I had a lot of amendments, and I was hopeful, wow, these are great ideas. People will listen, House members will listen. I'm in my 8th year. This is a great idea, and we have our majority leader stand up and say, but there's a flaw in it. When do we start communicating with each other? Why does it have to end up on the House floor that it's a bad amendment because it's $20 million short? It's about working together for what's good for this state. And if it's a good amendment and you have it beforehand because you've prepared your speeches for it, then work together on it.
Well said, Representative Macbeth. There are no other lights on the amendment. Clerk, unlock the machine. All those in favor, please vote green. Those opposed, red. Clerk, lock the machine. 14 in favor, 57 opposed. The amendment fails.